Okay, now we're going to move on to the second creation story in Genesis. For those of you who have not taken 205 or whose experience of Genesis 1 through 11 in Theology 101 is a distant memory, I'll just remind you that there are two distinct stories of creation in the book of Genesis. The first one, Genesis 1, was written considerably later and is probably penned and composed as an introduction to the Torah at least, and perhaps to the entire Hebrew Bible. Genesis 2:3, the story of the Garden of Eden, is ascribed to an author that scholars call the Yahwist, or the Yahwistic writer, and that's written considerably earlier. Now, the figure of deity in Genesis 2 and 3, the Garden of Eden story, is decidedly a male deity, not a male deity that has any female corresponding goddesses, but at the same time, he is male, and I will refer to him using the male pronoun. Our focus in Genesis 2 and 3 is not the depiction of deity, but rather the depiction of the first woman, who commonly called, as we see at the end of the narrative, Eve. And we want to ask ourselves the question, how is Eve, the mother of all humankind, the first woman depicted in this story? In the first story, in Genesis 1, what we have is a sense of equality or correspondence, because we have the first man and the first woman. They are created together at the same time in the image of God. He created them. But when we get to the second story, we have a lot of significant differences in the creation of the male and the female, and in the first important actions of the male and the female. And I want to divide it in those two areas. First, in terms of the creation, and second, in terms of what is customarily called the temptation and the fall. The story of the creation in Genesis 2 is much more concrete than the story in the first episode. In the first episode, God simply speaks. He says, "Let us make humans in our image." And God created humans in the image of God. It just speaks and it happens. In the second story, in Genesis 2, it's much more material. It says, Genesis 2. I'll read it. Verse 4, in the day that Yahweh God made the earth and the heavens, when no plant or field was yet in the earth, and it goes on, verse 7, chapter 2, verse 7 is our key verse here. Then Yahweh God formed man of dust from the ground, breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living being. Now, the word there is not Adam, which, as I said, is a generic term that refers to human beings. The term here is a term that specifically refers to male human beings. So the man is made from dust and the breath of Yahweh. Now we're going to draw a contrast between the way the man is made and the woman is made. So after a period of time, chapter 2, verse 18, then Yahweh God said, "It is not good for the man to be alone. I will make him a helper fit for him." So the description of what will ultimately be the woman is that she is going to be created as a helper fit for him. Now, what do we have here? The obvious understanding of this word helper, or at least the obvious understanding of the English word, is that it creates a kind of hierarchy. The man is the one in charge, and the woman is the helper. Unfortunately, that is a severe misunderstanding of the Hebrew here, because the word in Hebrew, helper, means something more like associate or partner. And in fact, there are many places in the Bible where Yahweh God himself is described as a helper for humankind. So we're not necessarily describing a hierarchical relationship with the man on the top and the woman underneath, but rather some kind of equality in function. The woman will be a helper or an associate for the man, one that is fit or appropriate for him. But how is she created? We learn this in verse 21. Yahweh God caused a deep sleep to fall upon the man, and while he slept, took one of his ribs, closed up its place with flesh, and the rib which Yahweh God had taken from the man, he made into a woman and brought her to the man. So whereas the man is made from dust and the breath of Yahweh, the woman is made from the rib of the man. Now, of course, this requires a certain degree of interpretation here. What is the writer saying by suggesting this? Now, we can go in two directions for this, and I'm actually not going to tell you which one is the right translation or the right interpretation, because I really think it depends on a lot of other factors that we'll be dealing with in class. On the one hand, we could see this as an establishment of hierarchy. The man is made first, and frequently the first thing is the thing that has priority. Not always, but frequently. Secondly, the woman is derivative from the man. That is, the man is made from fresh stuff, but the woman is made from the man's stuff. So the woman is derivative. The woman is created second, and the woman is created from the man. Might this suggest a kind of hierarchy? We have to ask, though, what about the rib? Why a rib and not some other part of the body? And it has been suggested, and this is just a kind of a traditional romantic interpretation of this line, but I think it might have some merit to it, that the rib is not the head, where the woman would be over the man. The rib is not the feet, in which the woman would be under the feet of the man, but rather something that is roughly in the middle. So we can, and I've also heard suggested, near the man's heart and under the man's arm. You could go a lot of different directions from this, but the question we need to ask ourselves is this expressing a hierarchy, placing the man first? Remember, this is the mythic story that brings us to the very heart of how the Israelites understood and constructed gender. So is this establishing a hierarchy so that the Israelites believed that the man was superior to the woman and had authority over the woman? Or is this perhaps implying a kind of equality? We're going to leave that question unresolved, but when we get to the third chapter, I don't think we have any of our answers given to us there, but we have a whole other set of complications that are made.